Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick example of how to create a couple of nodes. So we can use these for information points. Excuse me. What you can do is just create some quick shapes. So I have a fresh project open here. I'm just going to grab one of my shape tools. So hold down left click and drag to my oval tool. And now I can choose colors, opacity, whatever. So for information nodes, I'll just make them donuts. So I'll turn the stroke on and the fill off, which means it'll give me the shape of the circle, but it won't fill it in with color. And I'll just hold down shift and drag so it's a nice uniform perfect circle on the canvas. And from here, what you can do is actually increase or decrease the stroke of the circle itself. So I'll just give it a decent size, whatever I want my information node or the point. Let's say this is a bullet point for an information, a bit of information or a description or a title or whatever you wanted to put in that specific part of the network. Or you can use icons, whatever you wish. So I'll just do this as an initial shape. And then once I've finished making my edits and changing the color, if you want to change the color of the stroke itself, you can click on this little thumbnail here and change just the color of the circular shape. Alright, so I'll go back, and to complete your circle, you can either click off of the object or just click on the selection tool, the cursor at the very top of the toolbar. So now that I have an object, I can just click and drag it across my canvas and put it wherever I need it to be. So in this little demo, we're going to try to extract the idea that each one of these nodes are pieces of a network or something of that nature. So let's start by figuring out where all of our nodes are going to be. So if I wanted to just use this to duplicate it, I can hold down Alt on the keyboard and drag it, and that would create a duplicate. You can see on my layers panel, it'll just give me another shape. So I have two shapes. If I wanted to create new icons or logos or any type of graphic elements, let's see, yeah, I could do an Easter egg. Yeah. So my Easter egg can become one of the nodes, or if you want to go into a more infographic style, you can choose from our animated sets. We do have some infographics in here. Some of them are animated, some of them are static objects. So let's see if we can find, here we go. So we'll use one of these as a node. And sometimes they have animation on them. And you can test this by either scrubbing through the timeline or just hitting enter and letting the timeline play through. So burst triangle. So in design mode, currently I'm in design mode right now, you're allowed to move these objects on the canvas and they don't keyframe them anywhere. So if I was on the timeline at like 2 seconds and I moved it, it wouldn't keyframe it on the timeline. In animation mode, when I move it at 2.1 seconds, it's actually going to keyframe it from the original position at 0 seconds to my new placement at 2.1 seconds. And you see this little diamond, it's added a keyframe for the animation of it moving. And if I scrub through, that's where it started, and now that's where it ends. So be very wary when you're in design mode or animation mode. In animation mode, everything that you touch either in the parameters of the object here, so let's say scale, is keyframed. Scale, opacity, skew, anything that you change while animation mode is active is going to be keyframed at the point that this little black playhead is currently on your timeline. Right, so opacity. So things like this will become a little problematic for you if you don't realize down the line that you've actually been in animation mode the whole time. So ideally you want to set up your whole scene first in design mode. And again, in design mode, if I move anything, it doesn't keyframe it for me. So we'll do our layout here. This is our new network. So this yellow triangle, an Easter egg, and 2 pink circles. So we'll just make these nodes here. So if you wanted to animate these nodes connecting in some way, what you could try to do, probably the best way to do this, is use the rectangle tool. I stray away from using the line tool because currently in this version of Animatron we don't have shape morphing, which means you can't keyframe you can't keyframe vertices yet. The little points, right? So if I made a line, it's actually 2 points. Now it would be 3 points. I'll zoom in here. So 1, 2, 3 points. And in animation mode, ideally we'd be able to make this line start, let's say, at the beginning of this circle, and then animate it moving from this point to the next point in the network. But you see, as I move these nodes, they don't keyframe on the timeline because there's no shape morphing yet. So don't use the line tool just yet until we get that active. But what you can do, like I said, I'm just going to remove this from the layer. What you can do is use the rectangle tool. Instead of a stroke, I'll use a fill because I want it to be a solid color. And what I can do is just create a rectangle that looks like a line, and that's fine. You know, obviously if you want it to match colors or be a different color altogether, you can do that. Also because I was on 2.7 seconds and I created the line or the rectangle at 2.7 seconds, it placed it there on the timeline. So you can click and drag your time band up and down the timeline if you need to. So what I'm going to do first is a line starts at the point, and if you want to make it look like each one of these nodes is connecting to another, I'll go back to my parameters of the rectangle, and we have these things called registration points, and it's basically telling the object where you want this little pinpoint, and the pinpoint shows you where it rotates from. So if we wanted it to expand, which means like the line would grow from a specific point, we don't want it expanding from the middle out. We want it expanding from one point of the rectangle, or let's say our implied line, to wherever it ends. So what I'm going to do is click my registration point to be centered and to the leftmost, and you'll see that right here. So now when I rotate it, it's where the line starts, or where our implied line starts. So what I can do is on 0 seconds, right, 0 seconds on the timeline, I'll click and I'll drag it to our original node. I'm going to zoom out a bit here so you can see the rest of our canvas. And I'll position it so that it's pointed at the other node in our network. But currently, we don't want this node, we don't want this rectangle, this line, to change dimension much in the Y direction. We want it to change it in the length. So what you can do to keyframe this at 0 seconds, right? Currently we're at 0 seconds, there's no animation on it, but we want it to start from this point, or this node. And what you can do is, I believe this is width? Yes, this is width. So I'll just hold down left click and drag on size until it's kind of hidden below the node. And if you really want to organize your layers, the line would be underneath these 2 pink nodes, the circular nodes. So now I'll choose the time on my timeline in which I want this shape to eventually get to the other node. And I'll hold down left click on my, not scale. I'll hold down left click on size and just hold down left click and drag to the right. And this will expand it till it points to that node. And now you see that I've changed the size in our parameters right here. It has keyframed it on my timeline. So now when we scrub through, it's going to be connecting those 2 dots. And we can continue to use this the same method over and over again. If you want to create the node going at a certain pace, if you wanted to add easing to it, right? Currently it's constant, so if you hit enter, it just grows at a regular rate. If you want to give the expansion of that line some character, you can right click between two keyframes, set easing, and you can set the easing how the animation starts at frame 0 and how it ends at whatever our ending keyframe is. And there's in and out points, essentially where the animation starts from and where it ends to. So you can either turn in points off or out. So it's either slow or really quick, or we can do in and out. So it's kind of an expansion and a soft in, soft out. So now that I've added easing, you can hit enter to test it. It takes a while, speeds up in the middle, and then slows down when it gets to the next information node. All right, so if you have an animation on a line like this, you want to reuse it, you can simply duplicate that layer. So I have shape 2. Let's just call this line for the sake of our example here. And I'll duplicate it. I'll press this little button. All right, duplicate layer, or you can hit Command D, and it'll make a copy for me. And it's a very good habit to lock all of your layers, so that if you have two layers together, right, I just made a duplicate layer, the same layer exists over the original line. So if you want to avoid moving line and you just want to move the new copy of it, the new duplicated layer, you can unlock it, and now when I click and drag, it's not going to conflict with any of the other objects. In fact, I can't, oops. See, again, I'm on animation mode and I moved it at 3.4 seconds, and that's very dangerous because it added a new keyframe for me and I don't really care for that, so I'll switch back to design mode. So now that I have this line unlocked, let's see, I'll go to where I can actually select it on the canvas, which is at 3 seconds. And now when I click and drag, I can move the object without interfering with any of the other shapes that I've created. And it essentially locks me out. So since I've locked the layers, I can't actually select anything else. So just be sure that when you're putting your scenes together, that you lock your layers when they're not in use and you don't want to disturb them, and then you unlock them when you want to move them. And you can select the layer and it will show you, show you where it is on the canvas with this selection container, and then lock it when you're done, and now you can't interfere with it anymore. So now I have this second line. We know where the start point is because that's where the registration point is of the rotation. And there's already keyframes on it. You can see that with the blue stretch of the time band here. So if I wanted to change the timing, so I'll just scroll down. Let me expand more of the layers so we can see everything. So the original line happens from 0 seconds to 3 seconds. If I wanted the next line to occur at 3 seconds, right, it's not, this white portion means that it's not visible yet, and that's the next one. So in design mode, the other great thing is you can have keyframes, you can have a whole animation on this object. If you wanted to just rotate the object itself and not disturb the animation, design mode allows you to do that. So I can just click and rotate this. Let's bring it to a start point, like here, and rotate it so it's pointed at the triangle. Now what I can do is, after I've rotated it, the animation still exists on this object. So now I have another thing that I've just duplicated and cut my time in half essentially to creating that next rectangle. It's the exact same width, it's the exact same speed and time that it takes to get to that node. So again, very quickly I can grab that line that I've just created, duplicate it again. This is my second copy. Lock the copy that's underneath it because I don't want to disturb it. I can click and drag it to a start point where the rotation handle is, and then I can rotate it in design mode. Remember, design mode is very important when you don't want to disturb the animated portions of the object. And I'll get this into position, and I'll push this down my timeline so that now each one of these networking elements, let's say they're information nodes, you have text or something attached to them, or they're bullet points, and they're going to other icons. And this line doesn't quite make it, so what you could do is get to this keyframe here, click on it if you have to, just so it lines up with the exact time that the keyframe is on. And in animation mode, right, because we want to change something about it, I can go to my size, hold down left click, drag, and extend it a bit so that it makes contact with that node. All right, and that's animated now. So from the beginning to the end, the easing that we added, right, that little bit of animated character that we added still exists. All right, so that's a small network starting from one central point and going to 3 other objects. Now, if you wanted to expand this further and actually have this whole object, let's say this network, this piece is one whole animated element, and you want to expand it even further, which means we want this to zoom out, basically scale down, and then have other nodes be revealed on top of that, like branches. What you can do is unlock everything that's part of this network. So essentially the lines, the egg, the 2 shapes that we made, the lines. You can hold down Shift and click through your layers and select all of them. You'll see them all highlighted in blue. And then you can right click and convert to movie clip. And converting it to a movie clip means that it's one whole object now. This whole animation, I'll hit enter so we can play through it. The whole animation itself is now a part of one layer. So if I ever wanted to animate this whole object, right, now this whole animated bit is one object, it's a movie clip, I can actually animate the size of the movie clip and still maintain the animation of all of the elements inside of it. So let's say at 0 seconds this happens, goes to 9 seconds. Let's add some more duration to my scene. So this little red flag here adds more time to my scene, which means that scene 1 will now play for 13 seconds, or you can manually enter it by double clicking here. Let's say it's 20 seconds long, and now my little red flag has moved down the line. And sometimes you'll run into some bugs. Right now my slider isn't allowing me to move. So if Animatron automatically saves everything to the cloud, and you can see that in this little icon up here. All changes are saved. So that's kind of like your save point. If any bugs occur or something that just seems fishy or isn't working properly, you can always just refresh the browser. Let it load for a minute, and it will be the same exact project. It'll reset the canvas size and everything. So the animation is still there. We changed our scene duration to 20 seconds here, and everything is in one movie clip here. All right, so now I should get my slider back, and you can see this red flag is now at 20 seconds, and that's the duration of the scene. So my animation here with the node runs for 9 seconds. So what I could think about in the creation of my network nodes is that, all right, so I have my 3 initial nodes. They're all connected with lines, and whatever else happens with the text, you could figure that out later. But for the sake of timing, what I'll do is I'll take a second, right? It ended at 9 seconds, I'll go to 10 seconds, and then I'll scale this down. I'll just hold down Shift and scale it. And obviously, if you wanted this to be the exact center point, what you could do is click on the center pivot, right? When I click on it, you'll see it highlight, and I'll move it to the center of my information node. So now when I scale it down, right, hold down Shift, click, and drag, it scales down from the center of that node. So that gives me a lot of functional power with my animations. And now you'll see that over time, from 0 seconds to 10 seconds, my node animates, or my network of nodes animate, and then they get smaller, which allows me a lot more room to add more nodes with more branches and more information that you wish to add around it. If you wanted it to animate at the same size, right, at this size from frame 0, you can actually click the keyframe and left click and drag it to, let's say, 9 seconds, and then click the beginning point. There's this little blue handlebar, and you can click and drag that so that it starts the animation at 0 seconds. So what this means is it stays the same scale, right? My movie clip stays the same exact size from 0 seconds to 9 seconds, which is the completion time of this whole movie clip. And then from 9 seconds to 10 seconds is when the entire scale moves down. So it gives me more area to work with additional animations attached to it. So this can go further and further as much as you want. You can create more animated lines and nodes, add them to the layers, and then again select, I'll just make another few circles. That's 1, 2, 3. And just for the sake of looking like it's more nodes, I'll just draw some additional lines. There you go. Enter. Click to start the line, click to end the line, hit enter. So now I have another additional animation attached to this, but it technically isn't attached. Since we go through here, nothing is part of it yet. And all of those new assets, the lines, the ovals or nodes, whatever you want to call them, are all independent. You see on the layers, I'll click and drag my layers up so we can see all of them. So we have the original movie clip, which is these 4 nodes with the animated line segments. And then we have all the new nodes and new lines that we've added. So if you really wanted to expand on this even more, you can shift select every single one of these layers and make them a movie clip also. Right? So now you have the entire animation occurring from 0 seconds on. The 9 seconds are still the same size of that movie clip, and now the additional lines and nodes, and obviously you would animate those along the way too. But you can keep creating movie clips, and they're basically a hierarchy, a folder style hierarchy, like in Adobe Photoshop or really anything that has a lot of information one on top of the other. It's just a really good way to keep organized, and you can animate the entire element as one whole piece. If you need to go back into the animation and change anything about the nodes, the speed of the lines moving, or the positioning of anything, you can hover over the layer and click on this little pencil icon called Edit Group. Click on it, and it will give you its own timeline with the original movie clip and all of the broken apart elements, right? The additional lines and nodes we made, and then our original movie clip. And again, you can click on this, and it will expand you down to the original timeline elements that we had. And you can move these around individually if you so desired. And again, as one last little hint or thing to keep embedded in the back of your head when you're putting these animations together, is that design mode is your safety. Animation mode, be very careful about where your playhead is when you're changing things on the canvas, because it will keyframe it for you, right? Design mode doesn't add keyframes. Animation mode, you move anything just slightly and it will animate that little movement on the timeline. All right, so that should give you some basic idea of how to construct your networking animations, or adding nodes and making lines appear as if they're being drawn to another object or icon. And if we want to go all the way back up to the master canvas, you can follow your breadcrumbs. It gives you the name of every single movie clip that you've entered, and that's right up here where my mouse is. And I'll just go to scene 1 and click left click on scene 1, and it brings back my entire canvas. So whenever you see the white background, it's the master canvas. Whenever you see a grayed out background, it means you're inside of a clip. You're basically isolating that movie clip, and everything else on the master canvas disappears. All right, so that is the basics for creating an animation style like that. And thanks for watching, and definitely take a look at all of our other Animatron tutorials on our YouTube channel. Again, that's Animatron on YouTube. And we have a bunch of official Animatron tutorials for you there for any more specifics on how to use your tools, how to do a couple of different techniques. And thank you again for watching. I'm Bryce, your Animatron guru, and have a good one.